Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. And if you have not done so, please do subscribe to my channel, click that notification bell, comment, and like, and help promote the channel. Today, the IPCC Report, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What you need to know, or some highlights from it. And you should always question your sources' background knowledge when they get up there on YouTube or anywhere saying things. Well, how do they know this? So I'm bringing this to you from interviews with authors of the report I heard on Climate Pod, Democracy Now!, National Public Radio, as well as directly from World Resource Institute and National Resource Defense Council's coverage of the story, and my own background knowledge on what's now called climate change. Look, I first heard about what's now called climate change in the very early 1980s when I was reading the author Carl Sagan. Now, I wasn't reading him for environmental purposes. I was reading him because of my interest in space settlement as a kid. But I want to point out that's where I first heard Carl Sagan put out the idea that we are heating our planet by the excessive burning of fossil fuels, adding what are known as greenhouse gases in the form of carbon or methane to our atmosphere. These gases trap heat. Remember, there's only two factors that affect our planet's temperature. There's the composition of our atmosphere and how it holds onto heat or lets it go. And there's also shifts in its orbit. Those are the two primary forms here. So there's been warnings for decades that you keep burning tons of fossil fuels, you're going to change the composition of that atmosphere. So sometime later, and maybe it was 1988 or 1990 when I first started hearing about James Hansen, a NASA scientist, I believe, warning that, hey, global warming, it was called then, is kicking in. It's really time to start cutting back on fossil fuels. I had no problem with that concept. So then, why wasn't the message getting through? Well, it was maybe in the 90s I put together, maybe the early 90s, I pieced it together with my memory of what happened with all the denial industry around tobacco and cigarettes and cancer. There was paid for denial, paid for scientific denial to spread misinformation. Then the media had a lot of ties to the tobacco industry. It's all owned by big business interests, and they weren't eager to expose that. So I pieced together this is the same reason why the people around me aren't getting what's happening to our climate. And remember, even if you still are persuaded by those people, the deniers that is, they're generally on the payroll or they're just parroting information they heard from people on the payroll of the fossil fuel petrochemical interests. And no matter what, those fossil fuel petrochemicals are harmful to our bodies in other ways. It's bad to breathe in that auto exhaust and so on. So when I'm listening to these interviews about this IPCC report, one thing that struck me was an interview with someone from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and her saying her reaction was something like rage and grief. Well, think about how long I'm telling you I've known about this issue. That's the reaction I have myself. Well, why? Because we have passed, according to this IPCC report, and many of us saw this coming, we have passed the time period where you could simply shut off that fossil fuel spigot or just scale it back and expect the heating to stop. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't shut it off. We should. But we've passed that point. We are now into what are called feedback loops. So according to the report, the world will probably reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit of warming within just the next 2 decades. Well, that's pretty bad. We've already experienced nearly 2 degrees of warming. So now we're talking 2.7 degrees hotter overall. So what are these feedback loops I'm telling you about why the heating is going to continue even if we just shut everything off, which it doesn't look like anybody's really planning on doing? Well, as I've mentioned before in some other videos, the melting Arctic sea ice means Earth is losing its reflector, its giant mirror, reflecting heat back off the planet. As that shrinks, more heat gets absorbed and more of the ice melts. That warming Arctic is also causing permafrost to thaw, which is releasing methane, another heat-trapping gas. Those warming oceans are also releasing trapped methane in the form of that was frozen in the form of crystals on the seabed floor. The stressed by heat, sick, and dying forests are becoming fire prone and releasing methane as well, and we are losing them as a carbon sink. So these are just some of the feedback loops where, hey, it was time to stop years ago, you didn't, now Mother Nature is going to heat itself up. Now, as the articles from World Resource Institute and Natural Resource Defense Council that I will share with you and that I reviewed for this story point out, as the IPCC report pointed out, if you drastically cut emissions now, you could limit, hopefully, the heating to that 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And we already know the extreme weather we are in for as a result of it. We are experiencing it now. If you continue business as usual and continue listening to people defending petrochemical fossil fuel interests, defending endless, heedless consumption, that's what's called a high emission scenario. And the IPCC says if you continue on a high emission scenario, the world may warm 5.7 degrees Celsius or 10.3 degrees Fahrenheit with, quote, catastrophic results. Now, another interesting thing from this report is the report lauds that there are now improvements in what they call attribution science. Meaning in the past, it was really easy to get deniers on there and say, oh, we don't know if this is caused by climate change. So they've made more accurate the attribution science. But look, don't let that become an excuse 10 years from now. Nobody knew. Plenty of us knew, because the way science works is all probabilities. So if you add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, the probability is you're going to trap more heat. As the Earth gets hotter, which it has been, that starts shifting around weather patterns, leading to more extreme weather. So sure, maybe you can't always attribute this particular event because no one had that kind of accuracy until now. But you knew the probabilities were there, that you are making it more probable for more heat waves, more wildfires, more drought, etc., and so on. Now, the World Resource Institute and Natural Resource Defense Council really emphasize policy, the need for policy change. That means we need to speak up. Quoting from WRI, World Resource Institute, small-scale efforts won't be sufficient. We'll need rapid transformational change. Now, here's where you get into that, oh, it's a conspiracy, and that's really the last defense of the climate denial movement. But I'm going to tell you what the changes they're calling for, and you tell me how any of these changes take away freedom, are a conspiracy. Listen. Transitioning to clean energy sources. So here we're talking what? Wind, solar, responsible hydro, geothermal, with a connected grid with energy storage backup. Now, okay, how is that less free? How is that more of a conspiracy than having fossil fuels everywhere? Nuclear power plants, how? Electrifying our transportation sector. How are electric vehicles, electric buses, how is that less free than gas combustion? I mean, you could make the argument, but boy, you're really reaching it. And when you breathe in that gasoline and diesel, it's getting into your lungs. Maximizing energy efficiency in buildings and industrial processes. Maximizing energy efficiency. That's what they're calling for. There's your conspiracy. And listen to this one. I love this one. And reconfiguring economies so that sustainability takes place over mindless patterns of consumption. Natural Resource Defense Council. Mindless patterns of consumption. See, they're challenging the consumer-based economy. And I bet a lot of people who consider themselves traditional conservatives, which I sympathize with, well, you're not happy with that either. So don't let them brainwash you or trick you against those trying to protect our environment. And the last one, listen to this. Accelerate the increase in the annual tree cover gain 5 times faster. Okay, accelerate the increase of more trees. There's your conspiracy. So now why do I harp on about this conspiracy business? Because that's what people are going to say in the denial movement, in the paid for denial movement. It's a big conspiracy, IPCC, big plot. No, it's the opposite. The plot's the opposite. It's protecting fossil fuel petrochemical industry interests. That's the plot. Saudi Arabia, in one of the interviews I listened to, one of the authors mentioned that this report, let me back up a little bit, this IPCC report, they're not allowed to give policy recommendations. They're just allowed to say, here's what's happening, policymakers, you read it, you decide. And then it goes through all the different governments and they nitpick it, that kind of thing. So according to one of the interviews I heard, Saudi Arabia nitpicked it to say, we don't want this report to cover each nation's contributions to greenhouse gases. Well, why? Because that's probably to protect their oil industry. So you got it. Think about your own personal actions, but also think about how you are working climate change into your conversations. Go for those 2-for-1s. Fossil fuel is bad. It's bad for you to breathe in, and it's heating the planet. Okay. You want to reach out to your politicians, local, national, all of them. Just hit them up with emails. Say, I want good climate policy, regional. I want national. I want natural climate solutions. I want energy efficiency here. I want, help with solar, that kind of thing. But you want to make this the topic. Hey, I hope you found this video really helpful, and until next time, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel, you're liking, you're commenting. Sincere comments are great. I would love to get more of them. Sincere constructive criticisms, hey, here's what I'd like to see you do to improve, and help share the channel, help this channel grow. It's a lot of work. It's very time consuming. And until next time, as always, peace be with you.